Okay, so today I'm going to do a tutorial on how to set up and create a rough cut in Premiere Pro, which you can then carry into After Effects to do a dynamic link, so you're both editing and doing the VFX all within the same suite. Now, After Effects you can do some basic editing, however if you're doing a sequence it's always better to do this as a rough cut and then send it to After Effects so that you can just do the effects on specific clips rather than trying to organise it all in After Effects, which it's not really designed for. It's more designed for doing specific effects to specific clips rather than building out the sequence as well. You can build out a sequence in After Effects, it's just a bit more fiddly, and this is the way I would suggest you go about it. So if this is the first time you've opened up Premiere Pro, you should get something which looks very similar to this. And when you've started to create some projects, they will appear down here. But if this is the first time using it, you might want to create a new project. So we're going to do that now. Now within this new project, it's always good to start thinking about where you're saving things, and the first thing we're going to do is actually save the sequence today in the Watch VFX folder that I've got here. So I'm just going to click on Browse, and I'm going to go to Desktop and Watch VFX, and I'm going to choose this location. And I'm also going to title it something which I recognise it. So Watch Dynamic Link, and then hit OK. You don't need to worry about any of the other settings at this point because you're going to let Premiere Pro do its thing. So you should get a page that looks very similar to this, and it should be noted at this point you do have some tabs at the top here, but the main tab that you want to make sure you're working in is the editing tab for today. So just make sure that you are in editing. If you're in learning, it'll bring up some tutorials. If you're in assembly, it'll bring up a different layout. So just make sure you're in editing, and you're going to get something that looks like this. Now this project tab here, this is where you're going to import all of your files to work in. In the top here you're going to see the preview of your files, we'll talk about that later on. On the right hand side here you've got the timeline monitor, which is the finished video and what it's going to look like, and this is your timeline, which is where you're going to be building out your sequence. Now I'm just doing a very simple sequence today, so I just double clicked in this media pool here and I'm going to click on footage, and this is what I'm going to import. Now I am going to go through some really good housekeeping tips as well, so that while you're building out your sequences you should be following this kind of housekeeping and making a log of it as well, because everybody's housekeeping is slightly different. So as I mentioned earlier on, you are going to do the visual effects secondary to the actual sequence. So because of this, this means that you can just worry about the things that you might need in place to make to make your video and your sound look the best they can. So as you can see, you can download files into Premiere Pro, and these are referred to as bins in the actual software. So a bin is just another word for a folder, which is where you can keep media and resources within them. So I'm going to create another few bins, and I'm going to call one music, I'm going to call another bin visual effects, and I'm going to call another bin sequences. Now all of the footage that I've got for today's project is in the footage bin, and all the other bins are empty, or the folders are empty. I can also label these as well, so if you want to get really good and start creating different colours for things now within our project, I can also make sure that these two match the same label. So that was teal. So this will just show up as a different colour on my timeline later on. So once you've imported your footage and you've created some bins, now we're going to go ahead and create a sequence. Now it's really important at this point that we create a sequence based off of the settings of the videos that we are using. Now because this is quite a big task to ask the computer to screen share and edit out and do some visual effects, I've actually gone ahead and I've re-excoded these, exported these clips, as 720p files. In fact, I haven't. So these two clips here are still in their 4K versions. That's fine. I suppose that's just going to make my computer work a little bit harder. Now, As you can see here, I've already renamed these, so CU for close-up take 2 and MCU_take 1. It's always a good practice to either rename these before you bring them into the editor, if you can view the files. If you can't view the files, rename them in Premiere Pro, but then just be aware that it's only in Premiere that the files will have changed names. I always like to do it before I import the files into Premiere Pro, but on this instance, that's what I've done here. So I've got 2 clips, take 1 and take 2. That's actually labelled incorrectly. It should really be scene 1 and scene 2. So I'm going to go ahead and change that now. So the reason it's a good idea to get into naming conventions, again, this isn't very important for what I'm showing today because there are only 2 clips. However, if you are filming a sequence with multiple takes and multiple shots, obviously you want to make sure that you match these up. So medium close-up shot 1, close-up shot 2 are now named in a popular format. What I'm going to do at this point as well is grab one of these clips and I'm just going to drag it onto this new layer icon. You can also drag the media here, but the reason I like to do it this way is because I know that by dragging this clip onto the new item position here, this is actually going to make sure that the sequence itself has the same settings as this video, and because this whole video was filmed in the same resolution, that's going to be it's going to be the same for each. I don't need to make another new sequence at this point. What I am going to do though is rename this new sequence Rough Cut, and that's always good practice because we aren't worrying about visual effects at this stage. We're not worrying about music, colour grading or any of that kind of good stuff. All we are worrying about is getting this into a sequence which we can edit later on. So I'm now going to move this rough cut timeline to the bin from earlier, and to do that I'm just dragging over the top of this project tab, bringing back these bins, and I'm going to drag and drop that into sequences. So now that exists there. Okay, so now what we can start doing, I can actually delete this clip now because I want to show you something else that's good practice. But going back to the footage bin, I can double click these 2 scenes, and I'm actually going to use shot 2 first before shot 1, and that's because I'm going to start off on this and then move to a medium close-up. So what I'm going to do is play through the clip. I'm just going to mute my audio because you don't need to hear that, but I'm going to play through this clip, and some of this stuff like where her hand is over the top of the watch, I don't actually want that, so I'm going to wait until a little bit later on to see if that becomes more clear. So around about here she's now moving her the watch in view and her hands are out of the way, so I don't need to do as much marking. So at this point I'm going to mark an in point, which is I on the keyboard, and that's going to mark an in point here, and I'm just going to play through for 5 seconds. So around about here, and I'm going to mark O to mark an out point. So what this does is, by marking 2 points in this preview, now when I grab video only, so that's by clicking this icon here because I don't need the audio, and I drag this onto my timeline, this is just going to be this small segment that we saw here. Now if you're watching this and for example this actually probably stops just before 5 seconds, what you can do is you can see here you've got your trim edit selection that appears as a red icon when I hover my mouse near the edge of this clip. What this will enable me to do is actually expand that clip, and I can expand it here to about 5 seconds, maybe about there, and that's actually going to increase the track. I'm not going to do that at this point, but there's a handy little feature for you if your in and out points aren't quite good, or you want to add a bit more time from your video clip. You don't have to keep repeating this process once you've got it on the timeline. So now my timeline has become active, and yeah, we can see it's playing up here. This is what the finished video is going to look like. While I'm here, I'm now going to double click the other clip and do the exact same thing. And what I'm looking for at this point is, you can see here I'm messing around with the exposure. So again, I could watch this whole clip, but I'm just going to go to maybe around about the end here where it seems a bit more stable. And I'm going to again mark an in point, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and mark an out point. Grab the video only. If I was to grab the middle here and drag it down, it's going to bring audio as well, and although it's easy enough to just right click the audio, go to unlink and then hit delete, it's much faster to get into the habit of dragging and dropping it where you want it to be. And now again, I'm going to play this through, and that's looking good. Now, if you're looking at the beginning and you're thinking, well, this is taking too long, I think it should cut here. Something else you can do, another keyboard shortcut, is to hit B on the keyboard. This changes your trim edit to this icon here. And this is a non-destructive way of trimming your timeline. So if I drag this handle now to the cursor, what it does is it snaps that video with it. If I do it the other way around, so hit V to bring back my original selection, if I use the red destructive tool, you can see there it leaves a big gap, which means that I'd either have to click it and drag it to the edge to snap it back, or I'd have to press the space in the middle and hit delete. So again, the difference between the V cursor, the V button, which brings up the selection tool, and the B button that brings up this less destructive trim and move, ripple and remove, if you like. The official term of this is ripple edit tool. That's kind of the difference. You can also access these two tools here on the left hand side as well, but getting used to keyboard shortcuts is always a good idea. So V for the selection tool, B for the ripple edit tool, and C for the razor tool. The razor tool acts very similarly. If you wanted to get to here, just zoom in slightly, if you wanted to delete this bit here, you could hit C to razor it, and then hit V to bring that back, and hit delete and delete. Again, all these processes wield similar results, but I like to use this one. Also make sure the clip that you're wanting to ripple edit is selected, otherwise you can extend the wrong clip. So something like this. So I'm quite happy at this point with these two shots, and however you're building out your timeline, you want to do something similar. Okay, so now what am I going to do? I'm going to jump back over to my project, and where the sequence is rough cut sequences, I'm going to right click this and I'm going to duplicate it. The copy, I'm going to rename this color match, and I'm going to double click this sequence, and now you can see we've got our original rough cut and we've got our color match sequence. I'm not going to call it color match, I'm going to call it a correct format, which is primary color grade, or color. In fact, I'm going to miss the primary stage and I'm just going to go to secondary. No, do you know what? I'm going to miss both of these stages. I'm just going to go to the color grade. I spent a bit of time making sure that these two were fairly balanced anyway, so the exposure, the contrast and all the rest of it, the colours are all very similar. If your scenes have multiple white balances and it's all looking different colour-wise as from shot to shot, you'd have to do a primary colour grade, probably a secondary colour grade, before you do get to the final colour grade. So what I'm going to do, the reason we're doing this, by the way, is it's just good practice. So now our rough cut will always stay the rough cut, and our colour grade will always have the colour grade on it. And I like to do this so that the next sequence will be the visual effects sequence. And again, it just means that if any corruption or error ever happens, you've always got the previous sequence, which should be unaffected if something goes wrong. I can get rid of the rough cut tab at this point and jump over here to the colour tab. And the colour grade that I'm going to go for, I'm just going to go to basic corrections. I'm actually just going to reduce the saturation slightly, and I'm going to bring this back later on. So I'm going to do this on both clips until I get something similar. Stay to 60 on both, so that there's a little bit of continuity. Okay, now I'm going to add this back later on, but just so you get the idea, this is how powerful you can start making things. So in the next sequence, I'm going to right click the color grade, and I'm going to duplicate this one, and I'm going to call this one the VFX. Now, the reason this is good practice to do for your VFX sequence is purely because I've had it in the past where After Effects has crashed and it's actually corrupted the video files that were in its place, and I've had to revert back to a previous sequence. So I've always been stung by that. So this is just what I do now, just as a bit of a backup. So again, my VFX cut is active. And this is where we're going to dynamically link these two clips to work with in After Effects. So what I'm going to do now is right click this clip, in the timeline, and I'm going to go to replace with After Effects composition. And by clicking this, you can see now After Effects is jumping up and down. And we're going to actually dynamically link this clip with the After Effects composition, which and then anything we do in After Effects will show up in Premiere Pro as if by magic. So while that's loading up, I'm just going to go back to my editing tab. See, this is where the 4K footage is really messing with my system. Okay, so After Effects is loading up. Right, at this point again, going into Watch VFX, I'm going to call this Watch VFX project. So my naming convention lines up, and I'm going to hit OK. Going back over here, we're in editing, that's all good. So you'll notice now the watch has changed it with a dynamic link, and you can see this dynamic link here now. I'm going to drag this into the VFX bin just so it's where I can see it. I'm going to save my project at this point as well, so always make sure you're pressing Control S, sorry, or Command S. So now you can see here, I'm just going to change this to a third so it can actually play back. So we've got our clip here, playing in a glorious 6 frames per second. So anything we do now in After Effects, you'll notice we've got lumetri color, which is the color grades that we added earlier on. That's also here, and it's linked, and we've got our video clip here. So anything we do now within After Effects will happen on the other screen as well. So if I grab a new solid, I'll show you what I mean by that. And I'm going to make this new solid a composition size. Okay, so I'm going to leave that there. Now if I jump back to Premiere Pro, you'll notice it appears straight away here. And in After Effects, we are now just working on that one clip. We don't need to worry about any other clips. This is the only clip. And essentially, you just keep working your way through your timeline. So in Premiere, I would just click on this clip one more time, go to Replace with After Effects Composition, click on that, and as you can see down here, get rid of this render queue tab. Now you can see the first clip and the second clip, and they're both dynamically linking with each other to Premiere. I can move this into the VFX tab as well. And this is essentially how you're going to build out your sequence using Premiere Pro and After Effects. That's going to be it for this tutorial. See you in the next video.